Um, you're welcome to put some thoughts into the chat, save your answers for the open discussion after the presentation, or just carry these questions around in your head and answer them for yourself. The first is, what are the natural, cultural, and historic features in the community that tell you who you are and where you are? Second, what does this area say about you? And third, what do you want to see here 50 years from now? What do you want it to look like? These questions involve you in being a part of the landscape, the community, and the future of both of these. You are here, you are a part of these things, and these things involve you. While you look at these beautiful Justin Hoag landscape photos, I'd like to read a quote to you from The Island Within, a book by Richard Nelson. What makes a place special is the way it buries itself inside the heart. Not whether it's flat or rugged, rich or austere, wet or arid, gentle or harsh, warm or cold, wild or tame. Every place, like every person, is elevated by the love and respect shown toward it and by the way in which its bounty is received. Certainly, Okanogan County and Western Ferry County are full of bounty, and I hope we will always receive it well, respect it and love it and care for it in perpetuity. Back to you, Stace.
But Gert, what is a conservation easement? That's what I'm here to learn.
Tell us about that. What is a conservation easement anyway?
So conservation easements are the bread and butter of Okanogan Land Trust. And in addition to what we provide to the public and work with you all on preparing these kinds of presentations and educational opportunities, but primarily we work on conservation easements with landowners to facilitate their private property right to maintain the conservation values of their property. So just as private property owners have the ability to develop their property, they also have the right and the ability to preserve their land in perpetuity. And so that is what essentially Okanogan Land Trust facilitates. And so these are voluntary agreements that, again, permanently limit or restrict certain uses of the land to protect those conservation values. And Jerry's going to talk a bit about those conservation values in a little bit. But it is important for us to identify what the conservation values are of the land when we meet with a landowner. Is it agriculture? Is it open space? Is it habitat for wildlife? And so the grant holders, which becomes Okanogan Land Trust, have the legal right to prevent or limit certain uses because of those wishes of the landowner. And this may differ from land trust to land trust, but how Okanogan Land Trust operates is we hold conservation easements that have a perpetual term. So instead of a limitation, we hold easements that are for perpetuity. And we primarily hold easements that are with private landowners, as opposed to holding preserves, which is what some other land trusts do. So that is how we operate, and that is essentially what a conservation easement is. So as you hear from landowners later on in the presentation, you'll hear about why they wanted to enter into a conservation easement and what their motivations were and how that's been for them since entering into a conservation easement. So that is what a conservation easement is. And now we're going to jump back to Gert, and she's going to give us an idea of what conservation easements do not do.
Okay, thanks, Stace. It's time for Mythbusters. There are a number of misconceptions and untruths that circulate about conservation easements, And I'd like to bust these myths for you tonight. The first myth is that conservation easements are a public land grab that funnels public dollars into public lands. And the fact is that conservation easements are placed voluntarily by private landowners to preserve the land they love in perpetuity. These goals are achieved with the help of local land trusts through landowner donation and/or a variety of grant funding and community donations. Myth number 2. After a conservation easement is placed on a piece of land, that land is removed from the county tax rolls, thereby diminishing the income of the county. The fact is that the conserved property remains in private ownership and the owner continues to pay real estate taxes to the county annually. Myth number 3. If a landowner places a conservation easement on property, he will be told what can and cannot happen on the property, and people can come onto the property at any time. The fact is that the landowner works with the land trust on the terms of the conservation easement and agrees to abide by those terms. The land trust visits the property annually by appointment with the landowner to ensure the terms of the easement are being fulfilled. The landowner and land trust together protect the conservation values of the land. As always with private property, the general public cannot enter the property without the owner granting permission. Myth number 4. Conserved land cannot be sold or passed on to family members. The fact is that just like any privately owned land, the conserved acreage can be sold or inherited by a designee of the landowner. The easement, placed for perpetuity and with terms intact, continues with the deed for the property, thus keeping the land and all it provides protected. And those are the myths we busted. And now I would like to turn this over to our senior conservation associate and general land conservancy guru, Jerry DeBacker. Take it away, Jerry. Jerry.
He might need unmuted. Give me a sec.
I'm good. Evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I've been doing this too long, but I just spent the last 3 days up on a couple of our current projects. One in the Aeneas and one up further by Ellis Ford, and then one that we finished a few years back that's right on the Canadian border. It's good to see the snow this early. It's really great after the dry, hot fire season we had. I'd like to speak real briefly about the ways that we're able to hold these. Down at the bottom of this slide, you'll see 4 bullet points there. And those first 2 are ones that we normally don't get into. We do have a couple of easements that allow for public access. If you want to call the office or send an email over to us, we'd be glad to share that spots with you. The last 2 are the 2 areas that we primarily write easements for. Open space being everything from the farmland and the ranch land and the forest ground around, and then habitat often is paired with the work we do. That's one of the great things about working in the Okanagan and Ferry County is that we have these large shared landscapes that allow us to benefit multiple species spread out over thousands of acres. You want to jump forward, I'm good. So our area is a pretty large one. I believe it's the largest one in the state. The challenge we have, of course, is to get spread out over time and get these projects done. We've got a little over 10,000 done already, acres done already and into easements. We've got about 4,500 more acres that we're going to hopefully bring in over the course of the next 18 months. They are perpetual. That's one of the reasons that we're allowed to do the work we do. We primarily see the funding that comes through requires that these easements stay in place and run with title to the ground forever. Property rights are often described as being held in a quiver or in a bundle, and you can break out portions and sell off those portions, i.e. the mineral or the water, it could be the timber, and of course the idea of development. The fact is that if one's able to create a stick or an arrow that comes out of the bundle that is described for development, then one can also pull out a stick that is for conservation. And that's what we do. We work with people that wish to conserve their property, get it into a status where it's protected, able to be passed on to the next generation and the generation after that, to continue to be productive ground, to be beneficial for both the humans that inhabit the area and also the animals and fish that take up some of this space with us. We have a big combination of both donated easements that we've gotten over the years. We have purchased easements that we've worked with both the state and the federal governments to secure. And oftentimes we end up doing what's called a bargain sale, where we blend both some charitable intent with some grant dollars, and the combination, which is called a bargain sale or a discount sale, provides for protection of the whole project, but it's done at a manner in which it benefits both the private landowner getting the grant dollars, but also being able to bring some of the match to the table. We've got a classic example that's joined us this evening in the Alma family that just did this about 2 years ago in 2018 with us, and we're pretty happy with the results. We can slide forward if you want. We don't just do this, and Stacy, if you want, you can kind of just flip back and forth through these. We don't do this in a vacuum. We developed a conservation plan. A lot of the misinformation and untruths that were being spread around the community a few years back was that we were somehow some part of some international plan to grab land rights and water rights and secure them away for Lord knows what. But the fact is, when I heard those kind of rumors running around, what I did was I went down to the print shop and printed up our conservation plan and stuck it on the wall. So if you want to visit the office, when it's safe, of course, you'll see them up on the wall. And this was done by the entire community. We had held multiple stakeholder groups. We asked people about what they valued, why they valued it, and where they valued it. We worked with a GIS firm to put together a map that tried to identify where some larger parcels were, where some wetlands were, where riparian corridors existed, where public land touched more public land, or say private land was adjacent to public ground. And all of those different kind of characteristics that we were looking for, the prime farmland soils, the good grasslands, the good, strong, healthy forest, all were tied together into the analysis done on that level that created the map that then guides us about where we ought to be investing our time and energy and try to conserve some of this ground. And as you look at what we've been able to put together, you'll see a number of spots where there is that continuity between public ground onto large swaths of private ground that benefits multiple species. And that's also the case with some of the projects we've got in the works now. They're adjacent to existing easements, or they're adjacent to DNR or to Forest Service ground. And it's all tied back to this conservation plan that guided us. And naturally, it steers us more towards the wetter areas in the county. And I would argue also the more scenic areas in the counties. But the fact is that we're not just working in a vacuum, that we've spent time and energy. We're engaging in a update of that plan in the upcoming year. And that's what guides our work. There isn't some conspiracy, there isn't some outrageous thought process that we went into. We tried to be logical. We tried to be engaging with the community to design the plan and bring it all together. And the old cowboy philosopher, Will, once said land they ain't making it anymore. And that's the truth. We know that. And that's why we think it's important that you think about exercising your right to conserve and protect what it is we all value. And that honestly, at the end of the day, we all share. That's what I've got. Oh, I should introduce our next guest, who is, well, he's at least aware of the difference between North Central Washington and Eastern Washington, even though he now lives in Seattle. But Nick's been a great asset to the entire state and also to the national movement. This is Nick Norton, who is the executive director of the Washington Association of Land Trusts.
Thank you, Jerry. And I'll just unmute Nick here.
There we go. Stacy, can you hear me okay?
I can. Hi,
All right, fantastic. Well, great. And thanks for the introduction, Jerry, and really great to have an opportunity to come and talk with everyone just for a few minutes tonight, and for the excuse to have a cold beer. So I very much appreciate it. That's wonderful. So again, my name is Nick Norton. I'm the executive director of the Washington Association of Land Trusts. I'm here with Megan Non, who's our program coordinator. So we're a small but mighty two-staff organization. And I think the goal in the short time I have is to kind of zoom out a little bit and just talk about beyond the work that Okanagan Land Trust does in North Central Washington, really connect that thread to things happening across the state and nationally. I think the way I think about it is sort of the tools that you use at Okanagan Land Trust, being the conservation easement, which you've talked about a little bit tonight, and running a nonprofit. It's good hard work, and I think it requires not only a village to do that, but it requires a community of practice in the state and at the national level. So I think my goal is to kind of flesh that out for folks today. So I think a lot of the land trusts have really expanded rapidly over the last 10 or 15 years. And I think that's due to a number of different things, including, their ability to give community members a voice in, the lands and waters that we all rely on. And I think you spoke to that earlier really, really wonderfully. Their ability to work closely and, with private landowners and to be, landowner facing, whereas, other local governments or state agencies may not be able to spend that time to work closely and develop a conservation legacy in that way. And I think land trusts also are really innovative and opportunistic and are willing and able to pivot. They know what their priorities are, as Jerry described, and that's a really unique characteristic, I think, in order to secure critical conservation values with the local community's buy-in. So I think that's really fueled the rise in land trusts. I think you can see on this map, we have 32 land trust members across the state. Okanagan, you see right there in the top center, alongside all of the others that are members of our association. And I think very briefly, just to describe what we do, Stacey, maybe the next slide is the best way to do that, is we were originally created around a need to serve as a collective advocacy voice. The way I think about it is that the work that Okanagan Land Trust does is not political. It's about the conservation values of the land, and like Jerry said, they're not making any more of it, so it's about recognizing those and working with the community to protect those in perpetuity. However, the tools that you use and the work you do requires engaging in the political process. So that's where we come in, is we try and be that collective voice to make sure that the programs you might rely on to help purchase a conservation easement or a property work well, and that you have a connection with the agencies that may fund those projects, as well as you have a connection to a community where you can get any information and advice and learning opportunities around running nonprofit. Their land trusts are a nonprofit. They rely on donations from the community. And that's, again, like I said, it's hard work and it's important work. And so, that gives Jerry or Stacy or Brian a place where they can ask questions and connect with their peers and kind of learn and stay on the cutting edge. So that's kind of the work that we try and do. And then I'd also like to really briefly zoom out to the national level just a little bit more and recognize the Land Trust Alliance. So they're kind of the national body of land trusts. So they do a lot of that work the policy and advocacy work at this, at the national level. So that means focusing on, the Farm Bill or things like that, and the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program. I think that's mentioned on the slide, and that's a tool that I know Okanagan Land Trust has used in the past and is planning to use in the future to support, the preservation of important grasslands and ranch lands. In your service area. So, those examples, those programs need guardians. And our hope is that we can be that on behalf of the Land Trust community. And then one other really important thing that I'd like to say about the Land Trust Alliance is that they also administer and update what's called standards and practices. So being a land trust, you get involved in a lot of conservation real estate. This is very technical work, and it's hard work, and it's always changing. And so really what that standards and practices does is it lays out a skeleton for what does it mean to be an organization that can hold an interest in land, hold one of those bundles of sticks that Jerry mentioned, and do that forever. And what is best practice for that? And so Okanagan Land Trust, all of our member land trusts across Washington, thousands of members of the Land Trust Alliance across the country have adopted those standards and practices. And really it acts as a very powerful way to lift, have the rising tide lift all boats and ensure that we're all doing the work that's needed to hold an interest in land forever. The nature of the work we do means we have to be here forever, and that requires really strong practices with the tools we use, as well as really robust organizations. And so I think our goal between what we do at WALT and what we do nationally with the Land Trust Alliance is to give you that support and really act as sort of a belt and suspenders for your work at the local level. So I think I'll leave it at that, Stacy. I hope that was helpful. Really good to chat. And I've got a little kiddo who needs putting to sleep. So I may not be able to stick around, but I'm so grateful for the time, and I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, Nick, thank you so much, you and Megan both, for joining. And thank you for the work that you do on behalf of Okanagan Land Trust and the other land trusts in Washington State. So attend to a meal, and thank you for being here.
Wonderful, thanks.
Great, so now we're going to hear from a few landowners. We have the Nelson Ranch conservation easement that Okanagan Land Trust holds with the landowners Cynthia and Brian Nelson. And Cynthia Nelson is also on the Okanagan Land Trust Board of Directors, and she's also served as the board president. So these two have been involved with Okanagan Land Trust for a long time and have been supporters for a long time. And I'm going to jump forward here and share a video that they compiled for this presentation tonight, and you can enjoy some of the other photos that Cynthia has taken of her property and of the East Land while we hear this video. It's about 4 minutes, so just enjoy.
Brian and Cynthia Nelson, this is our granddaughter Avery. We're cow-calf operators, grow some hay. Avery's the 6th generation on this ranch.
So can you tell us a little bit more about your operation and what it is about being on your land that fuels your passion for the Nelson Ranch?
Well, we're still working the land that my grandpa and great grandpa worked with workhorses, and it means a lot to me to keep the ranch as a ranch. It's been here for 120 years, and we work real hard to keep it going. But I live for the days that I get to chase cows with Avery. It's really special. Katie started chasing cows when she was Avery size, and I just want to keep the ranch going.
Yeah, and then in August 2011, we were able to create 1,026 acres in a land conservation easement on this side of the eastern Washington. We're so proud of that.
What was your motivation for protecting your land and for placing a conservation easement? Was it a difficult decision, and how did you learn about this option?
It wasn't a difficult decision. I watched a lot of ranches get split up into 20s as I was growing up. When I was a teenager, everything started to change here. Ranchers couldn't buy ranches or farms because we were outbid by the developers by quite a bit. And I just wanted to keep the ranch together. This is really good cow country in the summer. It's not quite so good in the winter, but it's a good place to live, good place to raise your family.
Thank you. Cynthia, do you have anything to add?
I pretty much agree with him. When I came here and met him 2002, married him in 2004, and I've seen this beautiful country and how valuable it is to have nice, large, intact lands instead of splitting it up in 20 parcels.
Thank you. How was the process working with OLT, and has anything changed since it's been eased?
When we first started this process, I'd been reading a little bit about it. My banker was on the board of directors for a conservation group, and I talked to him quite a bit about it. And the first time I met with Okanagan Valley Land Council, it was Walter and Noah. No, it was Dale Swedberg and Lee Root, and we discussed stuff with them, and everything evolved. Got involved with Walter Henze and Peter Hill. Is that right?
Yes, Trust for Public Land.
Yeah, and it took a lot of time because it was all new to everybody, and we just kept going to meetings and talking, and finally we got it into an easement.
Quite a long process, but we did it.
Thank you. So, Ms. Avery, can you tell us what being a part of this ranch means to you?
Well, I really like it, and I love chasing cows with my family. So,
Okay, thank you.
Great. So you can see how much that's a part of the Nelson Ranch and how much this is part of their livelihood as well. So thank you, Cynthia and Brian, for sharing that so much and for putting that together. And now we have the honor of hearing from Walter Henze and Sarah Kaiser as well, who hold an easement, the Henze Kaiser Conservation Easement. And here's an image of them with their grandson. And Walter and Sarah are really important community members who serve in a lot of ways. They both come from, have retired from family medicine. Walter served as a doctor, and Sarah served as a PA and an OBGYN. And they came here in the 70s and built their home in the 70s that you'll hear about soon. And Walter, you might have noticed that Brian was recollecting if he had worked with Walter, because Walter was on the first board of directors and has continued to work with Okanagan Land Trust and be a part of this work ever since. So, and Sarah is currently on the Tonasket Cultural Community Center board of directors as well. So they serve the community in a lot of ways. And we're really glad that they could be here tonight. So I'll turn it over to Walter and Sarah to share their story. Unmute you here. That should do it.
Stacy said we moved onto this place in 1977, so we've been here for 43 years. We lived someplace. We live about 5 miles southwest of Avila, and our place is an old homestead, so it's a 160-acre piece.
Yeah, I always like to point out that we are still considered newcomers to Avila. You have to be here a lot longer than 43 years to be part of the Avila heritage. We accept that. We understand that. Oh, this is when we were in the Founders Day Parade. We just threw this in. This was 2011. To be marshals of the Founders Day Parade is an honor for some old people who've done a lot of things in town. So I was really surprised when they selected us, until I realized that by then we were old people who'd done a lot of things in town. We had a great time.
So we, after we'd been on the property for a while, we came to really love it and wanted to preserve it as a single piece. As I said, it's a homestead, 160 acres. And so we started the process. It was one of the reasons that I got involved with the land trust initially as it was forming. And we went ahead and began earnestly working on the process in about 2004. And it took about 2 years to get it done. And that involved thinking about it, excuse me, talking with our adult children, both of whom had grown up their entire lives on the land here. And there were a lot of considerations, a lot of hoops to jump through. But it was really a good process that got us thinking about, well, what do we want for this piece of land going into the future? So the other factor for us was, since we were doing this as a donated easement, we wanted to do it before I retired, because one of the benefits of a donated easement is that you get an income tax deduction. But I knew that after I retired, there wouldn't be much income, so that that was a better deal. Anyway, here's a picture of the old house. This is what the place looked like when we bought it back in '77. I think this picture was taken in a little earlier than the caption says, probably about 1980. But we had, by the time this picture was taken, we lived on the property here for several years at least, in that old farmhouse that's there on the left. And it was, it was pretty drafty and pretty uninsulated.
It had no foundation, no insulation, 60 amp service. Yep. for the whole farm. And I can't tell you how many cords of wood it took to heat it. And the pipes were frozen so often that when our 5-year-old daughter was at somebody else's house, and she saw them pull out a hair dryer, she looked at that and said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, it's to dry your hair." And she said, "Oh, I thought that was for pipes." She'd never seen a hair dryer used for anything other than defrosting pipes.
Yeah, so we had about 9 years to be on that spot and think about how we wanted to build our own house. And by the time we started planning it in earnest, we really knew the site well. We knew that we wanted an energy efficient house. So we built a house that was highly insulated. It's passive solar, so that meant it had good views to the south and the west. And so here you see a picture of, on the left is the house, and then there's a covered walkway built over one of the old original buildings that stretches back to the garage on the right, which is where the old farmhouse was. So we lived in the old farmhouse while we built the new house, and then eventually replaced the old house with a garage and connected them together. Anyway.
Yeah, some of the timbers that we used were from our woodlot. And each year that we were here, our love for our woodlot and for the acreage, the pasture land grew and grew, and our sophistication grew.
That is our knowledge about it. Yeah. Exactly. And so we, by doing a conservation easement on this 160 acres, we gave up the development rights so that the land can never be subdivided. It will stay as a 160 acre parcel in perpetuity. We designated 2 additional home sites so the property could hold 3 houses if that were wanted in the future. As you look at this map, you can see that we've got 440s there in a kind of a T configuration. And in the upper half, the northern half of the property is open pasture land, and the southern half is pretty much timber. So it's a nice mix.
Yeah, when we first retired, which was what, 15 years ago, quite a while ago, people said, well, where are you going to move now? And we just looked at them blankly, and why would we move? I mean, this is what we look out on, looking west towards Chappaqua. I'd say a detriment is we don't get many trick-or-treaters.
That's right.
Yeah, that's one problem. But other than that, we're pretty darn happy here.
So our goal for the land in perpetuity was that it would remain in agriculture. As it is now, the ag activities are divided between grazing, raising hay, and managing the forest. We're not doing the animals ourselves. We lease the land to our neighbor Mark Timmerman, who grazes it in a cooperative fashion, but we are the ones working on the timber management. For Trig Culp, that's Bear's older brother, helped us develop the forest management plan. And our goal for the land is perpetuity here. So the forest management is thinning and harvesting in a way that improves the health of the forest and improves the ability of the forest to resist disease and to resist wildfire.
You know, it certainly means work. Here I am shoveling manure. Any of those folks who've ever shoveled an entire truckload of manure knows how much fun that is. And then here's the cows that are around most of the year. Your grandson checking out some of our forestry thinning projects. He was pretty impressed. I don't know what to say about that bull. He was impressed too.
So this is a picture of Stagecoach Springs. Stagecoach Spring, it's one of two springs on the property, and it's called Stagecoach because about 30 or 40 yards uphill is the old stage road from Spokane over to Molson. So we fenced the cows out of the springs and created wildlife habitat areas. In addition, there's some areas we thinned, some areas we left as wildlife habitat, wildlife corridors with good snow intercept. And by being here so long, we learned a lot about the property. So our monitoring visits, once a year, the Land Trust comes up and talks to us. We tour the property. Usually we're here. Occasionally a few years that's happened when we weren't here.
And it's always been convenient. The term monitoring, I just tend to think of it as a mutually beneficial visit. It's always been very pleasant.
Now, for 6 or 7 of the years, Bear Culp was the man who came to do the monitoring, and all our monitoring visits have been good, but we always look forward to having Bear up here touring the property. He was so knowledgeable, and we learned a lot about forest management and range management. Bear had a great sense of humor and a lot of knowledge and
good stories.
Good stories.
Always stories.
Local histories. So here we are with Bear. Bear is showing the monitoring report to me and our grandson Johan, and as you can see, we all agree on the result. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Walter, for sharing. It's really fun to hear your stories and kind of the early years of you being on your land, and then going through the conservation easement process and how that helped your family to understand what kind of future plans you wanted to have for your family. So thank you for sharing. So now we have the opportunity to hear from Derek Olma, and maybe Noreen's around, but I know Derek will be with us. Let me go ahead and unmute you here. Okay. And so we've had Okanagan Land Trust holds 3 conservation easements, what's called the Olma 160, the Olma North, and the Olma South easements. So Okanagan Land Trust has done a lot with the Olmas, and the Olmas have been really willing and great partners for Okanagan Land Trust. And these are held under them as the landowners, Derek and Noreen, and also Sandland LLC. And here you can see pictured 3 generations of their family out on their land. So we're going to go ahead and just go through a few slides that show their land, and Derek will share a little bit about their process working with Okanagan Land Trust and motivations for putting a conservation easement on their land. Is your mic hot, Derek?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Well,
Thanks.
excuse me. I have a cold, so I'm going to sound a little nasally.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
I got it from the grandkids.
Yeah. So yeah, tell us a little bit about your family, and if you guys had some motivations for preserving the land for your grandkids, and what that was kind of like.
Yeah, really, I don't think it started really with the grandkids, but it started with my son wanting to come back after college, and it was a way for us to be able to help purchase some ground that we had been leasing, and it was beneficial just to help us try to grow. And it, as Brian said in the earlier piece, it's really hard competing against developers and to be able to expand. And we have to expand. We looked at 2 choices. We were either going to try to expand here, or we're going to move. I mean, and we'd rather stay here. And so working with the land trust, it has enabled us to do so. It's enabled to bring my son back, excuse me, and now my daughter and her husband, my son-in-law, they've also, he works on the ranch also. And so the land trust has enabled us to continue to grow. And now we do have 3 grandsons and a granddaughter. And who knows what the future will hold for them. But if they decide that hopefully they will continue, and we can just keep farming. That was our motivation. I think was just, and this Noreen will have something. It was a tool to help us expand, and we'd like to continue to do so, and stay right where we are. And if we talked about it, I think like Walter even mentioned, you talk with your family, and we talked with the kids when we went to do this, and what we were going to give up or what was going to happen. And we just want to keep it like it is. And if the grandkids decide that they don't want to farm, well, maybe then somebody else can have the opportunity to do so. It can continue that way. I don't want to see the ground broken up any more than it already is. It's just that part is important to us. And so when we're gone, if it's still being farmed, great. That's just
yeah.
It gives us such joy. I think both of us, when we know that forever we will, this land will be here, and whether it's our grandchildren or their children or someone else, like Derek said, that wants to farm. We didn't grow up here, and we wanted to farm, and we were able to come here, and we love Tonasket and the area, and being able to know that when I look out my kitchen window or my living room window, that land will always be there. And that's the part that I love about the land trust.
Thank you both. Thank you both so much. It means a lot just to hear from you and hear that story, and just how much you've given to the community by caring about the land in that way, and all the ways that the community will benefit from the protection of that land from further development. I also wanted to say thanks. Noreen Olma has served on the board of directors of the Okanagan Land Trust, and just the number of years that the Olmas have worked with Okanagan Land Trust to for the mission to protect ground, is really valuable to the community. So thank you both. And Derek, thanks for joining even with your cold, and for, taking the time away from rounding up the cows, and appreciate you both for being here. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry we weren't there on Tuesday, but we didn't get in. We were still gathering cattle, and we just didn't make it back to cell service in time.
Yeah, well, no, you guys work really hard, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thanks.
That leads us just to give, dedicate at least one slide to our admiration for the agriculturalists in this community, particularly those that are willing to work with Okanagan Land Trust and consider the mission, and consider their interest in protecting land for their families, and ultimately too for the benefit of the whole community. So thank you, and thank you everybody that was able to share their story tonight, and just be open and vulnerable in that way to share all your motivations and reasons for working towards this mission. And then we're going to move on a little bit and switch to thanking everybody who's here, and particularly donors who contribute to Okanagan Land Trust. That allows us to work with the landowners directly, and work on the due diligence to get a conservation easement in place. And so those donations help Okanagan Land Trust to perform that important work, to get conservation easements in place. So thank you all for participating. And you might be asking, if you're feeling inspired by any of this, what can I do next? What can you do next? Here on the right, you'll see a picture of volunteers that of the part of Highway 97 that we adopted, Okanagan Land Trust adopted. So these volunteers are cleaning up that section of highway. And so other ways that you can support OLT in this work is to spread the word about conservation easements. You've heard what they are and what they do not do, and so now you understand a little bit more about them. You could join the board or one of the 4 community committees that we have, and they're listed there. You can again volunteer for community events, such as preparing, during times of COVID, preparing things like this, information for the community. You can support us on social media, and in your conversations with people in the community, you can let people know what it's all about. And you can also contribute to newsletter articles. We put a newsletter out about once a quarter, and we'll be having another one being sent out here at the end of the month. And finally, of course, you can donate. Again, donations allow staff time to be spent on tasks that preserve the landscapes and protect this land that you've seen tonight, and that we care about in the community here. And so on that note, if you are thinking about future plans for your family and what you want to leave behind and what you want to work towards in your planning of your family planning, you can contact Okanagan Land Trust, and we can talk about options for leaving behind land, or there's a lot of options, and it just helps us to know who you are and what what kind of interests or what kind of interest you have to leave behind, and we can talk through that and provide some suggestions. So with that, we will go ahead and open it up to discussion. We have just a couple minutes here, and we're happy to answer questions, and anything that can't get answered tonight, or that has a lot of interest. If we hear that tonight, we can also develop a new presentation to dig a little bit deeper on any one of these topics. But we're so glad that you came. We're so glad that you celebrated Spirits of Conservation with us. Cheers, everyone. And it's great to see all of the costumes, and it's just really nice to be able to celebrate a little bit with folks just from a distance. So thank you all, and feel free, you can also visit our Facebook and our website there, okanaganlandtrust.org, and it's that okanaganlandtrust.org is a simple way to donate if you do want to do that in the future. So thank you all for coming, and please go ahead and feel free to put any questions in the chat, or we will open up the mics here for folks to share if you have about here questions. So I'm going to stop sharing. I think we've got some questions in the chat.
Get the mask back.
What is, oh, nice, Jerry. Put your mask on. What is the role of the county in approving easements? So great question, Katie. Thank you for asking. So when we apply for funding, like Jerry mentioned, a lot of times we'll have donated easements, but a lot of times we'll also work with the state or federal funding to basically purchase those development rights and hold that conservation easement. If we go to the state, we do have to go to the county commissioners and just share that we have these projects that we're applying to the state for funding. And there's not an approval required, but there is just a conferral that we have to provide. And so that's one of the ways that the county is involved in the easement process, the conservation easement process. And Jerry might have, or Brian might have a few more things to say, or.
The only other thing I would mention is that before we record the document, the assessor office also gets an opportunity to review it. This can have an impact on your property taxes. Normally it does not. If you're in a category, we try to stay in that particular category. But that's one of the reasons why the assessor's office gets involved at the time of recordation.
Great question, Katie. Hopefully that helped a little bit or answered it for you. All right, great. Oh, Ruth, it looks like you have
for Rachel about eminent domain, and Jerry can correct me if I'm wrong, but a conservation easement doesn't prevent eminent domain. Eminent domain happens when it happens, but easements are written in such a way that they acknowledge that that's a possibility.
That's what I was going to mention, Walter, is that eminent domain is referenced in the easement documents. And understand, folks, that this is not a quick process. I think the Nelsons would attest to that. It can take a number of years, or it can take, I usually tell people it's going to take at least a couple years to get there. We've done them faster than that, say in 6 months' time, but this isn't something you enter into lightly. I never suggest you should do this without thinking long term about what the impact is. But also, there are a number of different ways in which an easement can protect a place, but we cannot guarantee that there won't be some changes in the future because we simply don't know the future. And understand, we hold easements, the federal government holds easements, the state holds easements. There's a variety of different groups that you might not be aware holds easement. Ducks Unlimited holds a lot of easements. And so everybody has worked with the attorneys and the legislators to try to make it a simple tool, but there's nothing simple about this tool. So.
Great, and it looks like there's another question from Ruth Hall about how is the easement a tool to expand? And you might have seen in one of the slides we had that described the opportunity that the funding gives to a landowner. We don't have any restriction or say on how the landowners use the funding that comes to them when we purchase a conservation easement. But some of them use that to purchase additional land. And then maybe even there are instances where they've used that additional land and placed another conservation easement on it. So that's one way to expand operations and preserve more ground, is to use the funding that you get from a conservation easement, if it's a funded easement, and purchase more ground and place another easement on that ground.
Or to invest in their operation. I've seen them where they've put in fencing, they've put in a different crop of fruit trees, just different ways of investing in the actual operation, if it's an agricultural easement.
Yeah, I would amplify on that to to say to Ruth, if a landowner, as Sarah and I did, donate an easement, then we get the value of the easement as a tax deduction. That is, the value of the easement is the value of the property unencumbered. So how much is this 160 acres worth if we can subdivide it into 20 acres pieces versus how much is it worth if it's undividable. So that creates the value of the easement, and a landowner can donate that, which we were fortunately in the position to be able to do, or the landowner can sell the easement, and there are state and federal and nonprofit organizations willing to pay the purchase price, so that in those cases, the landowner gets cash for giving up the development rights, just like they'd get cash if they sold off the North 40. And so that's the cash that they can use, as Jerry said, to put back into the operation, or as Derek said, to use that money to buy additional land. So there's definitely a cash value to a conservation easement, and either it's a donation or you got the money, depending on how things are going. And I'd say it's pretty easy to do a donated easement if you're in a position to do that. If you want to sell the easement, then that requires doing it at a time when there's funding where somebody wants to purchase the easement, be that a state program or a federal program, generally farmland preservation programs, or there are others, but so that all factors into how long is it going to take to get this done.
Any more questions there? We're past the hour here, so we'll wrap it up in just maybe about 30 seconds, a minute, but we'll just see if there's any more questions. While people are thinking, I did just recently hear from a landowner who we're working with when asking him what he'll use the money for, because it was something we had to report to the state in a presentation for funding. And he said he'd probably use it to get another trough for water so that he can better manage his cattle, because the more places he has for water, the more that he can move them around when he's filling one of the water troughs. So, I think it just goes to show that the landowners are really thinking about their land and how to best manage it. And so it's really great to hear that. But with that, it sounds like we've got some questions answered, some memories shared of Bear, and some insight and some new insight. And thank you everybody for coming. Happy Halloween and happy spirits of conservation. So cheers and have a good night. We'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.